He who has ears to hear, let him hear.
Imagine reaching the end of your life only to discover that your greatest failure wasn't making the wrong decision. It was never making one at all. Not because you lacked talent, not because you weren't intelligent, not because God overlooked you, but because fear convinced you that burying your gift was safer than using it. Jesus once told a parable that has challenged people for generations. On the surface, it's a simple story about a wealthy master and 3 servants entrusted with different amounts of money before the master leaves on a journey. But beneath that story lies a question every one of us must answer. What are you doing with what God has placed in your hands? One servant took a risk and doubled what he had. Another did the same with less. But the 3rd servant buried his talent, believing that protecting it was the safest choice. Was he lazy, or was he simply afraid? Because there's a difference. As we step inside this parable from Matthew 25, we'll experience the story through the minds of the 3 servants. We'll see how gratitude defeated comparison, how faith overcame fear, and how one man's decision to play it safe cost him everything. By the end of this story, you may realize that the greatest danger in life isn't failure. It's allowing fear to keep your God-given potential buried. Before leaving on a long journey, the master gathered his 3 servants and did something remarkable. He entrusted them with his wealth. To one servant he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to the 3rd 1. Then Jesus adds an important detail that changes how we should read the entire story. Each servant received according to his ability. The master wasn't showing favoritism. He wasn't rewarding one servant while punishing another. He knew each man personally and entrusted them with exactly what they were capable of managing at that moment. That detail matters because comparison is one of fear's favorite weapons. Imagine standing there as the talents are distributed. The 1st servant feels the weight of great responsibility. 5 talents represent enormous trust, but also enormous expectation. The 2nd servant notices he has less. He could resent the 1st servant or question the master's decision. Instead, he accepts his assignment. His focus isn't on what someone else received. It's on what has been placed in his own hands. Then comes the 3rd servant. 1 talent, the smallest portion. Perhaps the questions begin immediately. Why only 1? Does the master trust me less? What if I lose the only thing I have? Those thoughts seem harmless at first, but they become the seeds of fear. How often do we think the same way? We compare our gifts, opportunities, finances, influence, or abilities with someone else's, and conclude that we can't make a difference because we didn't start where they did. But Jesus is teaching the opposite. God never holds us accountable for what He gave someone else. He asks only one thing: be faithful with what I've entrusted to you. Your starting point is not your limitation. It is your responsibility. The amount isn't what matters. Your response is. As the master disappeared into the distance, each servant held a different amount in his hands, but each held the same opportunity to prove faithful with what had been entrusted to him. No one knew when the master would return. There would be no instructions, no reminders, and no second chance. To receive more, what each servant held in his hands was enough. The only question was what they would do with it. The servant with 5 talents acted immediately. He understood that trust demanded action, so he entered the marketplace, invested what had been entrusted to him, and accepted the risks that came with it. Every decision carried uncertainty. Some opportunities worked out, others probably didn't. But he refused to let the possibility of failure stop him from moving forward. He wasn't fearless. He simply believed that doing nothing was the greater risk. Over time, the 5 talents became 10. The servant with 2 talents faced a different challenge. He could have spent his days comparing himself with the first servant. Why wasn't I given 5? Comparison could have paralyzed him. Before he ever began, he accepted that his assignment was different, but no less important. He focused on what he could control. Day after day, he worked faithfully with the 2 talents he had been given. Eventually, those 2 talents became 4. Then there was the third servant. His struggle wasn't with money. It was with fear. At first, fear sounded reasonable. Don't take unnecessary risks. You only have 1 chance. Don't lose it. Eventually, fear changed the question he was asking. Instead of wondering, how can I multiply what I've been given? He began asking, what if the investment collapsed? Why should I even invest it? That single shift changed everything. Because when your goal becomes avoiding failure instead of pursuing faithfulness, you stop growing. So he dug a hole, lowered the talent into the ground, covered it with dirt. The talent was safe, but it was also useless. And isn't that exactly what fear still does today? It buries businesses before they're started. It buries ministries before they're launched. It buries books before they're written. It buries songs before they're sung. It buries conversations that could restore relationships. It buries acts of obedience because we're afraid of rejection. It buries God-given gifts beneath excuses that sound responsible, but are really driven by fear. The tragedy of the third servant wasn't that he failed. It was that he never gave God anything to bless. He protected the gift so carefully that he never fulfilled its purpose. Meanwhile, the first servant discovered that courage grows through action. The second servant discovered that faithfulness matters more than comparison. But the third servant traded purpose for safety, growth for control. What he didn't realize was that every day the talent remained buried. The opportunity to multiply it slipped further away. Fear rarely destroys a person's future overnight. It persuades you to wait until you're more confident, more qualified, more experienced, more certain. And while you're waiting for the perfect moment, life keeps moving. Opportunities pass. The calling grows silent. After a long time, the master returned. The day of accountability had arrived. One by one, the servants were called to give an account of what they had done with what had been entrusted. To them, the servant with 5 talents stepped forward first. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more." The master smiled and said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Notice what the master praised. God's measure has never been fame, influence, or comparison. It has always been faithfulness. Then the servant with 2 talents came forward. He simply said, "Master, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more." And something remarkable happened. The master gave him the exact same praise, the same words, the same joy, the same reward. Why? Because heaven doesn't compare results. Heaven celebrates faithful stewardship. Whether you begin with 5 talents or 1, God's question is never, "Did you have more than someone else?" His question is, "Were you faithful with what I gave you?" Then, the third servant stepped forward. He carried the same talent he had received on the day the master left. Before handing it back, he offered an explanation. "Master, I knew you were a hard man, so I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here it is, what belongs to you." But the master's response exposed the flaw in his thinking. If the servant truly believed the master expected a return, then he should have done something, anything, to put the talent to work. His fear had become an excuse for inaction. The master took the talent from him and gave it to the servant who had faithfully multiplied his own. It wasn't a lesson about favoritism. It was a lesson about stewardship. What is exercised grows. What is neglected eventually fades. The third servant hid what had been entrusted to him, yet in the end, he lost the very thing he was trying to preserve. That's the great deception of fear. It promises safety, but if we allow it to rule our decisions, it quietly steals the future God intended us to build. And that truth reaches into every life, including yours and mine. The parable of the talents is about every one of us. Whether you realize it or not, God has entrusted you with something valuable. Maybe it's your ability to encourage others, your creativity, your leadership, your compassion, your wisdom gained through hardship, your resources, your voice. Or perhaps it's a dream that has been sitting quietly in your heart for years. The question isn't whether you've been given enough. The question is whether you've been faithful with what you've already received. Too many people spend their lives wishing they had someone else's gifts while neglecting their own. They wait until they feel more prepared, more qualified, or more confident before taking the first step. But the servants who pleased the master didn't wait until fear disappeared. They acted in faith despite the uncertainty. Perhaps today, God is calling you to uncover what fear has buried. Remember, your starting point doesn't determine your future. Your faithfulness does. One day, every one of us will stand before our Master. He'll simply ask what you did with what he placed in your hands. So don't let fear write the final chapter of your story. If this message encouraged you, share it with someone who needs it today. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and join us for the next journey through God's Word.